Yeah, you're just gonna walk across here? Is that what you're gonna do? You're right in the shot? Fantastic. Good evening, everybody. Hello. The cat, Luna, again. Both the cats are down here tonight, but she definitely wanted to be in the shot. So, let me get some things adjusted here. Um, yeah. Okay, so for tonight's video, this will be another one of those talky videos I do where first of all, I pick the right size brush. Let's see here. I'm going to work on a few things tonight, but, so, first of all, how has everyone's week been? Mine has been pretty cool, for the most part. There's a lot that went on, but I'm actually focusing on staying in a pretty positive light right now. So I was trying to think of things I could draw tonight, and again, I think this will be another one where I just kind of go off of stream of mind kind of consciousness things. But this time it's gonna be an experiment. So here's a little bit of background on the last couple of evenings that I had done this. So this is the 5th or 6th time I've gone through recording. And it's been kind of weird for me because there have been some moments where I felt like, I didn't like, for the last couple of days, I just didn't feel like I had the energy to want to draw. And it's such a weird thing because, it's not that I'm willfully like trying to not. It's not like I don't enjoy drawing. I do. I genuinely do. I think lately, like, and maybe some of you guys can relate to this, but I've been going through just a ton of things, just emotionally and just overall that weigh, they weigh you down. And I think I think everybody is going through something like this. And so, you end up putting a lot more weight on yourself on a daily basis, whether that's physically, emotionally, however it manifests, and that can tear you down. It can really begin to wear you down. And for me, I was just hitting some spots where I wasn't able to function right. And there's a few people I know tonight that normally I'll watch their streams throughout the day, and a few people just opted out today. And I can totally understand that. For different reasons, everyone's got different things going on where they feel like maybe life's just getting onto them or that sort of thing. I know I suffer from I'm very open about this. I do suffer from some anxiety, some depression, and that sort of thing. But I also end up I struggle a lot with trying to stay organized and trying to stay in the general scope of things with a goal in mind to get things done. And today just seemed like one of those days where, granted, there was a lot of other people I know that had harder days today than I did. So this isn't a video about that, but this is something where, I thought, what, I haven't got my drawing in today, so I'm just gonna relax and try and draw something. I don't know what. This tree, I didn't mean to grab a guide. This tree just came into my head right now, and I thought, well, let's do something with that. Let's see where this goes. And I love old trees. When I lived in Italy as a kid, there used to be these old. I actually don't know how old the trees were. I can honestly say they were a lot older and larger than the trees that I've seen around here in the States. And they were on the little bit of property that my mom and dad and I and my sister were living on at the time. And they were just these crazy, creepy, craggy looking trees. And they made me, fall in love with trees because they had these old gnarled sort of later would be like ant-like sort of knots in the wood, and they just looked like they were waving. And just I remembered seeing something like that either in Fantasia, but the Disney film, or something along that line that evoked that sort of imagery for me, where they had this really crazy kind of like look like they were gonna reach out and grab you, sort of thing, and I've always loved that about that sort of stuff. And so, there was one day where I thought to myself, I started looking up artists that draw trees, and of course, right now my brain is going to go blank while I'm trying to draw. Scott Gustafson is one guy's phenomenal fantasy artist. I met him some time back. I've had a couple of little email chats with him, things over the past couple months for some other stuff, and he's a master illustrator, and he's one of the guys that does amazing trees in his backgrounds and things like that, and really brings them to life and gives them something else, gives them a real spirit, sort of thing. There's quite a few fantasy artists really there's some that really are good at drawing foreground characters, and the backgrounds seem to be ancillary. They seem to be not superfluous, but they're there as kind of background filler. And I really enjoy people that can do something more with the environment and that sort of thing. And I know when I was a kid, I always wanted to have more of that, to be able to draw things like this. So I'm sorry if I'm just kind of blabbing on. I think I'm happy right now because I'm able to relax while I'm doing this sort of thing, and I'm just making these trees up as I go along. I'm literally making happy little trees as my cats. I am so happy. So I have a bunch of. I've never really shown the other side of the studio very much, and there's so the 2/3 of the studio back this way are a lot of shelves that have been in progress for a long time. Just trying to organize and put things in display cases and stuff like that. But my cats, unfortunately, find those to be. Oh man, he's so gonna knock some boxes over right now. They find them to be. Radar especially likes to get into the boxes and dig into places and knock things over, and I'm always terrified that something's gonna be knocked over and broken, or just somewhere I didn't expect it to end up. And but such is the territory with cats. So okay, so I think I've got kind of a nice look here, and back here in the background. You know what? I'm not. I'm gonna go ahead and merge this one down. So I've got all that on one layer. I'm gonna go ahead and go in here, do a new layer, and it doesn't really matter at this point. But I'm gonna go ahead and do. Maybe the moon is. Well, maybe the moon is right here. We'll just do the moon, sort of right here, right? And maybe there's some clouds back here, that sort of a thing. I don't know that this one will become much more than a sort of a black and white drawing sort of thing, but we're just doing kind of a sort of a background here, and maybe there's some foliage back here or something like that. I like doing drawings like this where I'm not really sure where I'm going to go with it, because I want I try to just I sometimes I plan stuff out, but I don't get a chance to sketch as much as I used to, which is kind of stupid. I mean, who can't just grab a piece of paper and draw for a while or something and have fun with it, Let's add another layer here, and we're going to put something here in the foreground. Let me save this one and we'll work on it. Hopefully tonight, I'm hoping that this software is going to be recording like I think it should. I've been having some weird issues. I know I brought this up, or maybe I haven't even put this in a video yet, because like I said, this is my 4th or 5th time doing a late night video where I was trying to talk while I was doing this. The last couple ones, they were just terrible. I just really didn't like them that much. So maybe there's, let me see here in the foreground, or what would be the foreground. Maybe there's, let me pick a slightly different color here. We'll go with this. So this will be a character here. Maybe that's too large. Let's go ahead and erase this. Give myself a bigger eraser here. we'll go in. This is one of the advantages to working digitally is, the quick ability to be able to, kind of mess with scale and do some stuff like this in ways that I would never normally be able to any other way. So maybe there's a guy down here or somebody. There's a person down here and they're just walking through this trail. They got a shield here, arm down here, first foot's here. They're looking this way, maybe. We'll figure that out here in a minute. So that looks good. We'll try something like that for now. It's going to be a lot of shadows. That's what this is going to be. So now we're going to go back over all this with inking. And my version of inking is simply black. So let's start with the trees. So now this is where I get to have a little bit of fun. I'm having fun actually the whole way along. But what I'm going to do now is just go in and start really giving some character to the trees. And, it's kind of crazy because it's taken me a little while to get used to using the pen tool like I would my normal pen, like where it's kind of an odd thing for me because when I ink digitally, I try to it doesn't even with the best system, I've noticed there's a little bit of hesitation. I mean, I imagine that some of that may have to do with how memory setup is or whatever, that sort of thing on a computer. But I've noticed that I tend to not, I tend to hold back a little bit, which is weird because, right, it's digital. I shouldn't be holding back. I should be going in and really pushing this as much as I can because I can always hit undo. And that's where the real beauty in this sort of thing comes through, right? And so, but I end up hesitating sometimes when I'm drawing, as if I'm gonna mess something up really precious and the truth is this is just all for fun, and I have to keep reminding myself of this. The good thing is that it's allowed me to get a little bit more brave with my inking traditionally, which I haven't been doing enough of. I quite frankly haven't even really touched traditional inking lately very much at all, just because when you feel like you're on a budget, and you've got projects down the road that you're going to use art supplies for and that sort of thing, then you end up going, oh, I'll just do this digital. And this is also easier because otherwise I'd have to be setting up this webcam to record myself and then secondary webcam over my art desk over here, which is set up to do that. But this is just easier and faster for me. And then I don't have to worry about exposure or, things being completely out of focus, which sometimes happens with this camera on my face. But that isn't as important as it being in focus on the artwork. So one criticism I've gotten in the past when people look at the trees I draw is well, a tree really doesn't look like that. Well, yeah, no kidding. I kind of like them to look like these weird sort of broken hand sort of things. And I can't really explain it as more than that. There's a look to them that I just really like, where a tree looks gnarled. And I've had people that have told me that's not at all what a tree looks like. I'm like, I swear I've grown up and I've seen trees that are just, they look like tendrils and knuckles, like somebody who's been a plumber or somebody who's worked in as a mechanic for a long time, and they have these really messed up knuckles that they're just completely jacked up looking, from years of having them bang against metal or that sort of thing. And so, that's kind of what I like these things to look like. Like they're almost fleshy, and and I like my trees to have this kind of feel like they're stretching, like they've got stretch marks on them, or they're almost like flame as well too, like just something that feels like it's in motion, and you can see where, so when you make rope out of sisal, or anything like that. This is something going back to all the way when I was in Boy Scouts. You take two of them, or I think it's two or three. This is how long ago it's been, but you twist it and twist it and twist it, and that's where rope has memory. And when you twist it a certain way, you get these two sticks, and so you'll twist and twist and twist like that, right? And you're pulling it, and it gets tighter and tighter, and then you fold it over itself again, and that's how you make a thicker binding rope. And I always loved the kind of vine-like tree growths. You'd see it where they'd have this character, this really sinewy look. And I think that's what later, when I read Lord of the Rings, and it talked about the Ents and tree folk all throughout fantasy, I thought about these things and like how strong a tree would be, not just because it's wood and the solidness of, if you've ever played baseball or anything, solid wood bat or something like that, or you have a musical instrument, and how heavy and deep and thick different kinds of woods are, koa wood, basswood, all this other stuff. And but they all have this grain in them, and they always looked like, and this is going to sound weird, but the wood grain always reminded me of the striations and muscles. So then whenever I'd see that on bark, I'd think like that's this massive looking, these trees, and in my head they were reaching up, or they were just almost pointing like accusatorily with their limbs and the endings of them, and because of that, sometimes I do end up falling into a bit of a pitfall where my trees, see, like that one got a little bit too thick. THICC, the arm got thick. And so something like this, like maybe I go, okay, well, there would be no reason for it just to have those little things off there. So maybe it's got another little bit going off of here. This is going back to a Commander Mark, Mark Kistler sort of bit of illustration where you're just going with whatever you think looks good. And like you'll notice, I'm like completely abandoning some aspects of what I drew earlier on the blue line, because I'm like, nah, not really digging that. So maybe, see, that didn't work out well either. So maybe there's a reason to follow that and not make it look like lightning or something like that. Maybe there's a definitive reason why I did that. It's not always good to go off the reservation and try and reinvent what you thought was a good idea. Sometimes it is. I think sometimes you can run with an idea artistically and then like come back and try and salvage it. But I rarely. There's a lot of times when I once I've drawn something in a blue line, I'll go, you know what? I liked how this looked. I don't want to mess with this much, and let me see what I can do to fix this or get this to come back to where I feel like it's working. And there we go. So there. Now I'm getting it to where I'm getting the naughtiness. The naughtiness, not naughty as in bad, like, like being a bastard or something like that. You know what? There's a really there's some funny joke that Eddie Izzard did some time ago. I've always loved the word bastard. I always have, mainly because there's that old joke of like bastard, like why are you being a bastard or something like that. It's like some little kid joke where it's actually talking about fish poop, bass turd. But he made a joke one time, and I've always thought it was funny. I know I'm going to totally ruin the joke, but it was something along the line of like, how bastard is one of those words that, especially in the English language, when you say it with a bit of a Cockney accent, bastard is one of those words where it can be good or it can be bad. Like if you say, well, you're being a bit of a bastard. Well, that then you're not such a great person. But if you say you're being a bit of a bastard, well, that's quite sexy. Maybe not the way I said it, but as he put it, shagging aplenty with that sort of thing. And so let me see here. We're talking about shagging. I am, and I'm trying to draw a tree. So all right. So there here we've got. Oh no, that didn't work. I don't like that. You undo that. Undo that. Sometimes there's happy little accidents. That was not a happy little accident. So, and Sometimes I illustrate when I'm doing this traditional. I'll use a brush because I'll get a little bit more, dynamism in there and that sort of thing. But this worked out pretty good. All right. So then, because I'm still not brave enough to do this, I'm going to go ahead and put the background on its own thing. So maybe background is this craggy sort of outcropping thing that I had out there earlier. Okay. And then maybe there is just some like almost desert or plain-like areas beneath it with some hilly areas in there. Yeah, we'll do something like that. That doesn't look too bad. So, okay, so then maybe up here in the sky there is... I want to point out the fact that it's taken me years to get a good circle going. And that's more of a guideline there. So I'll probably go back in and erase that later. That's why everything is drawn on its own layers. You ever see artists doing this digitally? That's why we do it, because we may go back in and go, you know what? I really didn't like that. So now I'm going to put a little bit of a highlight ridge on these things. So it goes there. You kind of see the facing here. Goes down, disappears there. Comes back there a little bit. Disappears there and comes back over here. And then, so this is where things get a little... Again, this is all just for fun, so I'm just going to quickly ink in some areas here. You know, I was growing up in Arizona. I moved to Arizona after we came back from living overseas in Italy, and that was pretty cool. That was the beginning of my 80s era. Such an awesome time. Hot Dog Magazine, all that stuff. You know, the retro stuff you see. And it was something to see desert. I fell head over heels in love with the Arizona Sonora Desert, the Painted Desert, all that stuff out there. It was just freaking gorgeous. Yes, sometimes it got to be 121 degrees in the shade. Yes, there were constantly heat advisories. That is true. But there was also a lot of times that it was really fun to be out there and to, to have that. Like, there is nothing quite like the desert sky. I can completely understand why people set up, telescopes to look out there and take in the night sky. And when you would do night exposure photography, like the way that the skies would look were just amazing. But one of the things I loved about it too was the quietness that you would experience out there. Sorry if I'm repeating myself. Sounds like I'm doing a sample track. You would. God, yeah. There are times whenever I'm like, I need to go back and edit that out. That was terrible. Maybe that's where I'll get lucky and the video will kind of skip out a little bit on that part. So, but so basically what I'm working on is just an idea, a real rough idea of a concept that was in my head where I thought, maybe there's something coming out of this. I usually don't go in and color these things. I just don't. I find something that works, layout wise. I go, okay, well, this is kind of the beginning for, a different illustration down the road. And so this is definitely when I can take the time to be a little bit more free with the pencil marking, that sort of thing. And, just start to block in some shapes really quickly and that sort of thing, because like in this case I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's not a shield on this one, but there is definitely there's a form, so this would I'm not going to give away too much on this one, since this may be a part of the story. It's a part of the story I'm still working on, and I really want some of this to come together in a good way, where I'm not giving away everything. Somebody remarked about that when I was talking about how much of my much of the illustrations I've done, the digital illustrations for Ardor, tell the story. I'm like, it's telling part of the story. It's telling some of the background of the story, but it's not giving away anything over the top. It's not doing anything like that. I was just trying to put some stuff out there that people could enjoy and they could get something out of the storyline from it. And so that's what that was about. That's what all that was about. So this gives me an opportunity to kind of block in, just an idea in my head for a future illustration. I don't do these as much as I normally did a few years ago, and I need to. This is just a really good practice because this is the one time when you can kind of free yourself up and do something. And I had the idea in my head, but I didn't want to psych myself out. So when I started this out, I was like, I don't know what I'm drawing, and I had an idea that I wanted to have trees in it. I knew I wanted to do something that was kind of a night-like scene, and just get an idea of overall, placement and that sort of thing. Sometimes it's fun to play with this because it'll help me think through a storyline, a story arc, or maybe character development, or what the character is seeing. In fact, this art may never even really make it into the final product. The story, the storyboards, or the comic pages for this graphic novel I'm working on. This particular layout may never make it out into that, but it will influence another piece or another bit of sequential storytelling down the road. So that's a lot of why I do this sort of thing, because I want and if I really want to, then I can go back in here in the background. And so let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to do a little bit of this. I don't normally do a whole bunch of this sort of thing, but let me see here. Grab my quell. And so something I will do is, because this is one of my brushes I really enjoy working with, I'll start to go back in and, I'll pick a darker color and decide, okay, I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna start coloring in some of this area. Now you'll notice there's a little bit of weirdness going on there with the blue line still showing, but I'll go ahead and turn that off here. Leave that on. Okay, so now we're just down to black and white. And I am very rough and very weird when it comes to coloring in some stuff. I can't really explain this, but I have tried so hard to do color studies, and I know there's a ton of artists out there that say, oh, this is what you really need to do. This is the kind of thing that you want to do to get, the feeling and everything else like that out there for a particular piece of work or something. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll give it a shot. I'll see what comes of this and this sort of thing. And sometimes it works okay for me, and then there's other times when it's just horrible and it just doesn't work out that great. And I'm like, oh my God, am I a failure at this? And then I finally started realizing, this was something I had a discussion with a couple of other artist friends about this the other day, that there is no right or wrong way to this. As long as I'm evoking the mood or the feeling that I'm going for, that's all that really matters here, is that I can come back in here and I can, erase out areas here and bring back my highlights as I feel like I need to, just, and this is, again, all very loose. This isn't anything more than just me kind of, going in and pulling some stuff in and out as I need it, and just having fun with it, because that's what this is really supposed to be about. It's supposed to be me just kind of trying to, figure out exactly what these things look like for this character, for this moment. What sort of feeling am I getting out of this? I like doing this more than I like doing, those Pinterest boards or pin boards. I know a lot of people like that stuff. I've never really been a big fan of that. I struggle with it a lot because I have virtual pin boards where, I have all these ideas. I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm going to use this in the next thing I'm doing, and I either lose them, I forget about them. It's a number of things will happen where I just never get back around to it, or it just doesn't turn into what I wanted it to turn into. Or worse yet, I had a really good idea I was stuck on, and I'm like, oh, hey, I'm gonna kill it with this. I'm gonna do something really cool, and it just never comes together like I think it will. And that's okay. That's okay. There's always there's always that moment where you're not totally sure if something really is going to work for you, but that's where stuff like this comes together, and it's just for quick working. I know that when I did Pagan Zoetrope, I did a lot more work like this, where I would try and go in and I would sometimes go in and very much, you know, plan out a lot of the shots like crazy, because I was writing. Well, here's the weird thing: Pagan Zoetrope was a comic that I wrote so much out of my own mindset, right off the cuff. Like, there were moments when I was just putting stuff together. It didn't always make sense. It didn't always work. And that's exactly why I ended up abandoning that, unfortunately, because I worked myself into a corner. That was not fun. And so it became something where later I thought, okay, I don't want to do that with this new one, Ardor. Ardor, in a lot of ways, was far more personal for me. It was something where it was based on stories, in my head that I had been making up since I was a kid. And without going into too much detail on some of this, because I don't want to bore you guys with it, but Ardor is very much where, when I was growing up, I had a lot of different storylines in my head that I wanted to try and to do, and all these other sorts of things, right? And the more I thought about them, the more they all started to meld into this, for lack of a better term, multiverse. And that's it's probably giving me a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, it's making me sound like I'm not trying to sound disingenuous. I'm not trying to sound like anything more than it was just something I did back then. And I remember writing all these stories and all these things about these creatures and these places, and how in my head they all existed in similar places because they were all they all intertwined. And I was fascinated by that, because when I grew up as a kid, as I grew up, as opposed to, a head of lettuce. Growing up, I always wondered what other people's lives were like. So my friends that went home, they had their own lives. They went on to their own thing. I was obsessed with that later in video gaming. One of the first games I really played that I kind of got that was Shenmue. Shenmue it doesn't get, I think, the respect and accolades that it really deserves. It was the first game of its kind that was really free range, free roaming for what it was worth. It was an open world sort of thing. It was way ahead of its time. Its spiritual successor is another game produced by Sega. Sega made Shenmue, called Yakuza. And so, and there's a lot of ones like Grand Theft Auto, and a lot of those other ones owe a lot to that. But in it, the NPCs, the non-player characters, would be able to go off, do their own thing. They had their routines. They went places and went to work here, there, all this other sort of thing in a virtual sense, based on the criteria of the overall timeline that existed within the game. And most of the time, that where you might play a game for an hour, well, that was like 6 hours in game or something. It was sped up. So you'd be able to experience things much faster and see things much quicker. But the point was that in my head, I would see things like that, and I would be like, oh, hey, that's something I'm what happens in a world like that? How do you write a story? How do you write a narrative where you've got something going on with one character, but then elsewhere you have these other characters that have got, their own things going on, and do you leave them behind? What are they doing? What else is going on with them? And so I had hoped at some point in time that Ardor would be the beginning of, actually, this goes back to Pagan Zoetrope. And so the reason I'm explaining a lot of this out is because I know that people have often asked me questions about other stories that have shown up and what they mean, like Gage and the Emerald Children. There's a little chapter out there that I have published. It was in one issue of Pagan Zoetrope. It was just kind of a weird sneak in. I didn't say much about it. I was really nervous about it. And it's the first chapter of that book. It's the only place it's ever been published. And so long story short, I had over the years started to build up what these worlds were like, and it was just through concept art. I was always drawing, and everyone always assumed I was just drawing random things, but it wasn't. It was me trying to fill in these things, because I always looked at what Ralph McQuarrie did for Star Wars, for George Lucas, and how his artwork built the world before the films ever came about. And you just, you got the sense, which is very much how he sold it to 20th Century Fox and got his movies made. That's how it happened. That's how he was able to hold this together and bring this together. And it's not original to do concept art for a world, but in this one it was, how do I weave these different ideas I have into something? That has been a struggle of mine for a while, for a long while, because not everything works, not everything comes together as it should, and that can be sometimes to my own chagrin, because I'm like, oh man, that's, I really don't want that to be the case. I want it all to work together, but sometimes it just doesn't. So with this one here, this is pretty much, the shot here. Can you guys believe, as I checked the date, it's 12:45 in the morning, September 1st. Where has the year gone? It's been so crazy. And I thought about that today. I was like, man, it's September, October, November, December. Four more months in this year. And it's definitely been stressful for so many of us. I would say for the vast majority of us, And I know for myself, I talk to some of my friends. They have anxiety like I do, and it can be paralyzing. Sometimes a good walk helps it. Sometimes just sitting down and drawing or talking it out can help. And but the biggest challenge really comes from, how do you keep moving forward? And just like this drawing, it started out, I can go from there. I'll just kind of go back and replay all this stuff here. But basically, it started out, not even with that one. It started out with the trees, right? And I knew I had an idea in my head, and so this is the way I approach this. Is pretty much how I'm trying to approach life right now. I'm behind on a ton of things, so much, and to some degree that's art, but on a lot of other stuff. Okay, and you just kind of start to figure out where everything else is going to place in there. So once you have a rough idea, and this is a gross oversimplification of how I'm looking at life, but once I've started to figure out what the parameters are, then I start to go back in and redefine what my idea means to me. And I go back in and I clean up the edges and I try and streamline it for myself. And not everything works, right? But then I'm like, okay, well this came out good, so let me add a little bit of flavor to it. Let's take this to Flavor Town. Let's see where this goes. And that means I'm going to color this up here. I'm going to get a little more brave, and I'm just going to use one layer and do that. And so when that happens, then I also have to be smart enough to know I'm going to save it and I'm going to quit, and I'll be able to walk away from this and go. That was just a nice bit of drawing for the night. I took just a little over 30 minutes to do this, and I think it came out just fine. It's a nice little bit of just quick concept work that I can put in the bag and come back to later. And it's my own idea. It's not the most strikingly original thing, but it is something that puts a moment in my head and also keeps my fingers in practice, which is really, really good to do. And because, man, let me tell you. So on the note of this, there was, I had thought about doing Inktober this year, the whole Jake Parker thing. And I still very much may do something along that line. I still have it in my head that I want to get through an Inktober-like thing. There was this crazy video that came up. I shouldn't say crazy. I don't know all the wherewithal behind it. A few of my friends have weighed in on it, and I am not the kind of person that's going to jump on a bandwagon and just be like, oh, God, plagiarism. But there's a guy, another artist out there who published a book about 5 years ago, and he's saying that Jake Parker basically plagiarized his entire overlook on how to draw, how to shade, how to build form, all of these things, right? And he points out all of these things in there that, yes, when you start to look at it, it does make sense. It does start to come together, and you do start to go, well, there is a little bit more than, a coincidence in some of this, right? And as he's talking about it, in there, I'm like, I am seeing this. I do get that. Okay. Yeah, that makes some sense. I can see where he's coming from and how, it does seem like, maybe Jake Parker really did take some ideas from him. But as one of my friends, pointed out, and I was like, well, no, that makes sense. Honestly, how many ways can you draw something? I mean, how many ways can you really? I'm going to ruin this if I keep messing with the bigger details. So I'm going to undo that right now. How many different ways can you shade something? If you're, especially if you're talking about drawing, if you're talking about certain things like that, like what what else can you do? And so it was one of those things where, like, I get it, and I'm not gonna share the links. I'm not gonna do any of that stuff right now because sometimes I think there's a lot of division out there for the sake of division, and I really don't know where I'm sitting on that argument with this. I don't even really have much in that. I think it's just like, well, here's a guy saying, Jake Parker, copied my stuff, and if you really want to look it up, you can find that on YouTube. But it made me think to myself, I'm like, well, I don't want to support somebody if he really did plagiarize, but at the exact same time, I still want to do something for Inktober, so I may end up doing a series of these daily, digitally, and then trying to stick to something thematic. The good thing is a lot of other people have stuck with that and worked with that, and I certainly can't hate on Jake Parker for trademarking and copywriting Inktober and utilizing that as his own thing. I guess it did start on his social media standards, and his website. He did kind of found it, but the term I thought would be a little bizarre to try and nail down. So I don't know. I'm terrible when it comes to trademark and all that other stuff. I will be the first one to admit I am not that great with that stuff. So yeah. So anyway, well, I hope that for everybody watching, I hope you guys have a good week, and that whenever it comes down to the stuff that we're dealing with in the world, there's a lot of good and bad decisions we can make. I this week had to make some crazy decisions, some good ones. They worked out good in the end, but for the sake of keeping this on point and everything else like that, I won't go into any details on anything that I went through this week, but I will say that it made me kind of think of a lot of the stuff I was going through, and it's been crazy. I mean, this is even this week, just the other day, the actor that played Black Panther passed away, and he's younger than me, and that really got me. It's like, here's this guy that had all this promise, everything else like that, and he had kept having cancer, colon cancer, I believe it was, a secret for 4 years, basically from the moment he got announced as the central character of Black Panther in that movie, in the MCU. And like a buddy of mine, Matt, said, it was really, it was actually pretty classy, and I had mad respect for him for holding that secret in there. He had a real old Hollywood sort of feel to him, where he wanted that, I believe he just wanted that ambiance. He wanted that it was probably good for his mentality and just in general to be able to have his personal life and then his persona that he puts out there, marketing wise and for the brand and all that stuff. So, but from everything I can tell, it was something where he was fiercely private, and that's something he wanted to have some control over, and I can completely understand that. In this day and age, especially with avenues like social media, especially TikTok, you get people that are oversharing, and it's actually put me in a bit of a quandary. So before I end this, I'll say this: I had really actually thought about getting on TikTok because I was trying to find an outlet for performing poetry, for being able to get out there and say something. But I watched it, and there's only a few things out there that really kind of interest me on TikTok. Poetry seems to be one of those things that you can find it, but for some reason it seems to be much bigger in people from the Middle East and a couple of other cultures that really push that. There's a dearth of what seems to be American poets of any kind, Western poets in general. There is some music I found that I like. There seems to be a lot of exhibitionism, male and female on both sides. I mean, I guess that's cool, whatever. and that sort of thing. But it's more flash in the pan. So there's a part of me that is wondering, is it worth even trying to get on there and do that sort of thing? But at the exact same time, I have the same questioning concepts about getting on Twitch, because I always feel like I'm late to the game on this sort of thing. And I actually very much enjoy curating and being able to refine this sort of thing, because I know I'm just talking to a camera right now, and eventually other people will watch it, but I can control that aspect. And I'm very old school in that. I had actually a long time ago very much appreciated how pre-recorded television and certainly cinema worked, because you can refine and present things in a particular fashion, whereas when you go 100% live, anything can happen. And that's exciting in its own way. I've done improv, I've done things like that, and it can go all over the place, and you have to learn to run with it. And thankfully, speaking of live, my buddy Phil Mackey, through his Stay Tuned page, we've been doing a show where we've been interviewing different people. This last week was me and Phil's really good friend, Matt Wendt, who is a phenomenal comic illustrator, and that was so much fun. I really loved that one. I loved all the episodes we've done so far. We're only up to 4. We've got a 5th one coming out tomorrow night, I believe, at 7. So that has been really fun. So if you want to check that out, his name is Phil Mackey. It's the Stay Tuned page on Facebook. And we go every Tuesday at 7, sometimes 8 o'clock, and we bring on special guests, and we talk about comics and other things like that. We tend to veer off on different things, but we've got some interesting subject matters we're going to be covering, and I believe we do have a guest lined up. I forget his name. That's terrible of me, and I don't want to pull up the website right now, just in the event it pops up into the wrong window. So anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys. I do appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next quick drawing kind of vlogging video. Talk to you then.